I am a 24-year-old female, 24 female, and my husband is a 27-year-old male, M27. We have been together for 6 years. I will be using fake names to protect our identities. My husband will be referred to as Alex and my brother as Dalton, M32. Background: we met on Tinder, and what was supposed to be a one-night stand turned into something a lot more serious. Back then, I had a drinking problem because I had been sexually attacked a few months before meeting Alex. The day after we hooked up, I went to a party with people I didn't know very well and ended up drinking too much. They used my thumbprint to open my phone and called the last person I had texted, which was Alex. He picked me up that night and took me to his apartment, where he stayed up all night to make sure I was okay. Since then, we have been together. We got married 3 months after our first hookup, which may sound insane, but it made sense to us. We didn't tell our families until later. Although my parents were shocked, they were happy for me because they loved Alex. However, my brother Dalton was furious at the time. It took over a year for Dalton to get used to Alex, but then they became quick friends. Alex even served as Dalton's best man at his wedding. Dalton and his wife even named their child after Alex. Everything seemed to be going well between them. Dalton, his wife, and their child even moved in with us in 2020 due to quarantine when we bought a house. Dalton and Alex seemed to be inseparable. However, a few months into quarantine, I ended up getting pregnant. We were all excited, but sadly, I miscarried at 8 weeks. The day it happened, I slipped on my nephew's toy car and fell hard, which made me start bleeding. Dalton and Alex had taken the cars out that day to go fishing. I was in a lot of pain and bleeding, so my sister-in-law and I tried calling them multiple times, but they didn't answer. I had to go through the loss of our child alone. Shortly after, my brother, his wife, and their child moved out. I hardly talked to them or anyone else for months. I felt like I lost myself during that time. Additionally, due to the miscarriage, I found out that I can no longer get pregnant without intense medical intervention. A couple of days ago, while cleaning out our closet for spring clothes as I do each year, I texted Alex while he was at work to let him know what I was doing. I placed my phone on the bed and started cleaning. Typically, I begin by putting away the snow boots. As I picked up the first pair of boots, I heard a thud. Behind them, I found a book with the word finances written on it, which struck me as strange because Alex usually takes care of our financial matters. Curious, I opened the book and came across a picture of my brother and Alex. It brought a smile to my face. I continued flipping through the pages, wondering why he had the bills written down in a hidden notebook. Then I reached the second page. As I turned it, I saw a picture of my brother in his underwear glued to the page. My heart stopped. I read a few detailed descriptions of which body parts my husband would kiss, and much worse. I sat there in disbelief for a few minutes before closing the book and throwing it onto the bed. I picked up my phone and noticed several missed calls from Alex. Almost immediately, I heard the front door slam shut, and Alex rushed up the stairs. At that point, I felt genuinely terrified. It was like being in a really bad horror movie. He entered the room and saw the book. In that moment, he fell to his knees, crying and begging me to tell him that I hadn't read it. The only thing I could say was, "What the frick?" I threw the book at him and more photos spilled out, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. As soon as he realized that I had read the book, he started screaming at me, accusing me of invading his privacy like a moody teenager. We're married, for crying out loud. It's not like I was going through his phone. I quickly grabbed some clothes and personal belongings and went to my parents' house. I told my mom everything, but I didn't disclose many details to my dad. However, my mom reached out to my brother, although she didn't share the outcome of their conversation. She invited my brother to come over for dinner and talk to me. Since I left, I have been receiving crazy texts from Alex. He asks for forgiveness, threatens to harm himself, and calls me names that are far from pleasant. One thing he said that stood out was, "I forgave you for losing our child, so you can forgive me for this." I have also received numerous calls from his mother and sister asking what happened. I'm not sure if I want to tell them the details just yet. Am I the one in the wrong here? Dinner with my brother is happening tonight. I may provide an update soon. I'm still unsure whether my brother knew about this or if he was involved with my husband. Update. I left the dinner table and am now in my room. To say that I'm at a loss for words would be an understatement. Dalton and his wife came to dinner, and as soon as we said grace, Dalton started to speak. It turns out that Dalton knew to some extent. He knew that Alex wasn't straight, but he didn't know that Alex was basically obsessed with him. Apparently, the pictures in the book were taken as a joke, but since I didn't go through all of them, I'm not entirely sure what to think about that. Alex had confessed his feelings to Dalton one night, but he was too scared to admit it to me. Dalton tried to help him come out to me and supported him through it. We suspect that Alex developed feelings for Dalton during that time. Alex had planned on coming out to me, but after my miscarriage, he never found the right moment. Now, it all starts to make sense. The browsing history on our laptop, the vibes I got from him around our male friends, the requests he made in the bedroom, it's all clear now, even though it was a shock to discover. I read some texts that Alex had sent Dalton, blaming him for everything. After reading those, I'm confident that my brother didn't engage in any infidelity with my husband. At the moment, I don't have a job, so it will take some time for me to get back on my feet. I'm glad I found out the truth. I'm not the least bit upset that Alex is not straight. I'm just disappointed that he didn't tell me, and that he reacted the way he did when I found out. The way I discovered everything wasn't pleasant either. I am sorry there isn't much more to share, but honestly, I'm glad that's the case. I plan on reaching out to Alex's family eventually, as I assume they won't stop trying to communicate with me. But for tonight, I really need some sleep. Thank you all for your advice. I intend to update tomorrow after speaking with Alex's mom. Update. After careful consideration, I have decided not to talk to Alex's family. A commenter pointed out that doing so would mean outing my soon-to-be ex to his family. I believe that every individual has the right to decide for themselves when to come out, and I don't want to force that upon him. I may no longer be with him, but I believe that every person deserves autonomy in their coming out journey. Update. This morning, I spoke to my mom and sister-in-law. I know some of you suggested talking to my brother, but as the comments kept coming in, I realized that he could still have been lying. As it turns out, my brother was indeed involved with my husband. Not only did my sister-in-law know about it, but my mother knew as well. Their affair has been going on for much longer than I initially thought. My sister-in-law discovered their relationship 4 years ago when she looked through my brother's phone. She then reached out to my mom for advice. They had a serious conversation, and our mother told my brother to end the affair, which he did. That's why they moved out. I blamed myself during that time for the strain in our relationship, but it turns out that it was actually their fault. Why did they all lie to me? Because they thought I was fragile. They believed that I couldn't handle heartbreak. They witnessed my devastation when I was sexually attacked and when I miscarried. They didn't want to see me in that state again. In a way, I understand their concern for me, but this betrayal feels infinitely worse. I have just finished packing the rest of my clothes, while my soon-to-be ex is at work. I'm going to Tulsa to stay with my cousin. He has offered me a job there, so I have accepted it. I don't think I want to be around people who watched my life crumble and still lied to me. I will no longer maintain contact with Alex, except for divorce proceedings. I'm not entirely sure how that process works yet, but I'll figure it out. This will be my final update. I plan to make an appointment with a therapist, hopefully for next week. I aim to find healthy ways to heal and possibly forgive, although it is too soon to tell. And yes, I am still holding on to my AA chips tightly and will continue to do so. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. Shocking to say the least. Curious as to what is going to happen with your brother. Him saying, "I forgave you for losing our child," is absolutely wild. Sorry, girl. Comment 2. There should be an online class to learn to spot fake stories like this, because there is no way you all actually think this is real. Now for the update, thanks for all the comments and support from my last post. The past 2 weeks have been, well, I'll just get into it. After the dinner with Dalton, I thought I had a grip on things, but life had other plans. I was wrong to think that was the end of it. A few days ago, I was at my parents' house trying to make sense of everything when my phone rang. It was Alex's sister, crying, saying that Alex had been in an accident. My heart sank. Despite everything, I rushed to the hospital. There he was, bruised and broken but alive. The sight of him in that hospital bed, so vulnerable, stirred something in me. I couldn't leave him like this. While I was there, Dalton showed up. He looked at me, eyes filled with guilt, and then he dropped the bomb. He confessed that he had been the one driving the car that hit Alex. It was an accident, he said, but I could see the truth in his eyes. He had been drinking, and he was angry. Angry at Alex for the affair, angry at himself for letting it happen, and angry at me for being the reason they were sneaking around. I was stunned. Dalton, my own brother, had put Alex in the hospital. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Alex had done. And yet there I was, taking care of Alex, because that's what you do for family, right? The aftermath was messy. My parents were torn between their children, and my sister-in-law was a wreck, blaming herself for not stopping Dalton. The police got involved, and Dalton was charged with DUI and reckless driving. It was a mess, but somehow I found myself at the center, trying to hold everyone together. I should have left then, but I didn't. I stayed to help Alex recover, to support my family, even though they had all lied to me. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Then, just as things seemed to be settling down, another shock came. Alex's mother called me, sobbing, saying she had found letters Alex had written to Dalton, letters that detailed their affair, their plans to leave me once I was strong enough. They had been planning this for years. Alex's accident had brought everything to light. I felt like a fool. I had been so concerned about not outing Alex that I hadn't seen the full picture. He and Dalton had been using me, and my family had been protecting them. I was angry, so angry that I could barely see straight. But I didn't leave. I stayed, took care of Alex, and tried to mend my relationship with my family. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared to be alone, or maybe I just didn't want to admit that my life was falling apart. Now I'm sitting here writing this update, and I realize that I'm still in the middle of this toxic situation. I should leave, but I can't bring myself to do it. I'm not sure if it's loyalty, fear, or just plain stupidity. I'm not oblivious to the fact that I should get out. But for now, I'm still here, taking care of Alex, dealing with my family, and trying to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. Thanks for reading. My family kept my kids out at a bar until midnight, so I laid down the law and showed them who's boss by setting strict ground rules and keeping a watchful eye on every family gathering to ensure it never happens again. We went out to dinner tonight with our two kids, 7-year-old and 4-year-old, and my wife's parents and siblings. We didn't go out until around 8 p.m. The restaurant bar was doing karaoke night. Everyone was into it and going up to sing or singing along with other singers. My 7-year-old went up and sang twice. Around 10 p.m., my 4-year-old fell asleep on me. I had already paid the dinner bill, and I was signaling to my wife that I wanted to go. Everyone else wanted to stay and keep drinking and singing. I thought the kids should go home. In my mind, when the family goes out to dinner, we should typically pack up and leave together when the kids start falling asleep. My father-in-law suggested one more beer, and my wife told me she wanted one more and that she and my older daughter could get a ride home from her parents if I wanted to take the little one home. So I agreed and took the little one home and asked my wife to leave soon and not to have the 7-year-old at this bar until midnight. Long story short, they all walked in my house at 12:30 a.m., almost all of them drunk. I was pissed, and I made no secret of it. I didn't yell, but I sent my daughter straight to bed, and when my wife got pissed off, I told everyone just how I felt. I thought it was irresponsible to have a 7-year-old at a bar doing karaoke until after midnight. I feel like it sets a bad example, and honestly might be considered slightly dangerous. We all know how bars can be around closing time. I think they all, especially my wife with our kid, needed to show some good judgment and realize that it was time to leave 2 hours and 4 beers earlier than they did. My mother-in-law drove and she was sober, just FYI. It might be important to mention that I feel that they as a group don't show good judgment in stopping the party when they should. Am I the jerk and a buzzkill, or was I justified? Edit. A few more details might be needed now that I've read a bunch of replies. First, the reason I didn't just take our 7-year-old with me was because my wife specifically said that 7-year-old was having a good time and asked that she stay just a bit longer with her. I agreed but asked that she not have her there much longer. A lot of people saying, well, it sounds like you expected this. Sort of. which is why I specifically asked that they not stay long. I don't think she's excused because I expected it. Maybe a bit of history would be helpful too. It's not the first time that we've had an argument about needing to learn to stop the party and not always agree to one more beer. Also, I get that it's a cultural thing for a lot of you folks out there. But it's not like this is a party at a private place or some kind of local festival in a small town in Greece. It's a regular American bar that stops serving food at 10 p.m. and is mostly just drunks by midnight. Edit 2. I guess I should also say that while I was upset that our daughter was at a bar so late, my bigger issue was that I thought when I left, I asked that they not be out until midnight, and I thought we were agreed they were only staying just a bit longer. I'm mad that she ignored what we discussed, and once again, I feel like there was a lack of self-control. I'm sure they said, let's just have one more, over and over, until the DJ finally closed up shop. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, you're the idiot. They were at a restaurant, and mother-in-law was completely sober. They were having some beers and sitting around talking while people did karaoke. You make it sound like it was a nightclub. Kids who have never seen adults just having a drink and behaving well in a restaurant setting are the ones who end up going out and getting drunk everywhere as soon as they can drink. You never learn what's normal or appropriate. You never learn to just be there in that sort of environment. Her being at a restaurant past bedtime with a responsible adult while family members have beers is literally so normal. This feels like the nightlife version of thinking abstinence-only education is a good idea works. Comment 2. I guess it depends on where you are from. Where I'm from, this is a perfectly safe and normal hour to come home. Karaoke bars are family places. Anyway, nothing bad happened. Everyone was safe and had a great time. Don't ruin it. It is not worth it to argue. I don't see where they set a bad example. They had fun, were responsible with the drinking, got home walking instead of taking the car. You could have taken the 7-year-old with you. Now for the update, thanks for sticking around. A lot has happened since the last post. So after that night at the bar, things got pretty tense at home. My wife was mad at me for being mad at her, and I was still fuming about the whole situation. We barely spoke for a couple of days, which was rough. But then, out of nowhere, my wife's sister, who was there that night, called me. She said she felt guilty about how late they stayed out, and that my wife had actually wanted to leave earlier but got pressured into staying by the others. I didn't know what to make of it. Then, a few days later, my wife's brother, who's always been a bit of a troublemaker, got into a fight at another bar. Ended up with a broken nose and a night in jail. My wife was upset, but I couldn't help thinking, I told you so. It's like our night out was just a preview of what was to come. The fight was the talk of the family for a while. My father-in-law, who's usually the life of the party, went quiet. He started talking about how maybe they all needed to slow down with the drinking and the late nights. My wife was shaken by her brother's incident and finally admitted that maybe I had a point about that night with our daughter at the bar. We had a long talk, and she apologized for not leaving earlier like we'd agreed. I apologized for how I handled my anger. We decided to set some new ground rules for when we go out, especially with the kids. It felt like we were finally getting somewhere, but then my wife's job threw her a curveball. She got offered a promotion, which was great, but it meant more responsibility and, you guessed it, more after-work events. The first one was a big deal, a dinner with some important clients, and she felt like she couldn't say no. She promised she'd be home by 10. I was at home with the kids, trying to keep my mind off the clock, but 10 came and went. Then 11. At midnight, I got a call from her, and I could hear the noise in the background. She said she was on her way, but I was already having flashbacks to that night at the bar. She got home at 1 a.m, and we had it out again. She said the dinner ran late and that it was important for her job. I said she could have excused herself earlier, that she didn't need to stay for the after party. It was like we were back at square one. The next day, I got a call from my wife's boss. He wanted to apologize for the late night and said he'd noticed my wife seemed uncomfortable staying so late. He assured me it wouldn't happen again. That call made me realize that maybe my wife was under more pressure than I thought. It didn't excuse everything, but it gave me some perspective. We're trying to work through it all now. My wife's cutting back on the late nights, and I'm trying to be more understanding. It's not perfect, but we're making progress. and I'm keeping an eye on those family gatherings, making sure they don't get out of hand again. Thanks for reading. My dad decides to marry his girlfriend just 4 years after Mom died, and I suspected she was his mistress. So I skipped the wedding for a beach trip with family, and he got a taste of his own medicine when she left him at the altar. My 18-year-old female father is going to marry his girlfriend next week, a day before my cousin's 21-year-old female birthday. My mother died 4 years ago, and almost 2 weeks later, I don't think it was even 2 weeks after that, my father was dating that woman. I was grieving, and I had to tolerate a total stranger in the house. My father told me that he met that woman at work. The doubt that she has always been my father's mistress is always in my head, but I don't know, I don't like her anyways. My cousin organized a trip to the beach, which will last a week. It was given to her by my aunt and uncle because she won a scholarship overseas in a college. My aunt and uncle won't go to the wedding. Some of my other cousins won't go to the wedding to go on the trip too. My cousin arranged the trip entirely on purpose to ruin my father's wedding, since my mother was her godmother. My father was mad at her, but my cousin told him that she's not going to cancel her trip for a second wedding. In her literal words, she said by text, "I'm much more interested in seeing the grass grow than in your wedding." Today, my father found out that I will be going on the trip too, and he's totally mad at me. He even cried, telling me that everyone is punishing him for finding love. I asked him if my mother wasn't the love of his life. They always used to say those kinds of things, and he kept crying, saying that I don't understand because I'm too young. It's his way of shutting me up, even when I want to talk about politics or important things. He just finally found love, his words. He said his girlfriend is the real love of his life. Good for him, I guess. My mother always said he was the love of her life until the last day, and because of his words, my mother was never the love of his life. I think I feel sad to think about how my mother would feel if she heard my father say that he finally found real love, when in my mother's eyes and words, he was her soulmate. Can you really find the love of your life in 2 weeks? I understand that grief is different for everyone, but who grieves spending Christmas with their new girlfriend and not with their daughter who lost her mother? He neglected me since that even if I was a teenager, everything was always about how he feels and wants. I told him that I will go on the trip and I don't want to attend his wedding, and he kept crying. My paternal grandmother called me to pray and tell me that I am being unfair to my father, who just found love again. But I just don't want to go, neither be near him. I stopped being close to my dad a long time ago, and my perception of what a father figure is has been almost totally erased from my mind. Edit. My parents didn't have an open marriage or anything like that. My mother always made it clear that she would divorce if she thought the marriage was bad or getting weird. I'm sure that in her eyes, she had a healthy and normal marriage. We were all shocked with the fact that my father introduced his girlfriend when we were all grieving. It's something no one understands to this day. Info: my mother died really quickly from a virus bacteria. She died within a month and a few days, and no one expected her to die. Not even my mother expected her health to get like this. She believed to the last day that she would live. The person who took the most care of her in the hospital was my grandmother. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You are 18-year-old. You are an adult now. Daddy can't make you do something you don't want to do. Your cousin planning the trip to coincide with his wedding was brilliant. You will have a much better time on the trip. Not the idiot. Comment 2. Not the idiot. At least one good thing is most of the family are not making you feel guilty. Have a great time at the beach and just tell your dad, perhaps I'll just make it to the next wedding. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around. A lot has happened since the last post. So, the beach trip was a mess from the start. My cousin, the one who planned it, got into a huge fight with her boyfriend the night before we left. They were screaming so loud the neighbors complained. She decided to break up with him right then and there, and he was supposed to come with us. Now we had an extra ticket, and she was a wreck. The morning we were supposed to leave, my aunt found out about the breakup. She was furious because she thought my cousin was throwing away a good relationship for some petty revenge against my dad. They had a shouting match that ended with my aunt saying she was done with all of us. She said she wouldn't go to the wedding or talk to any of us until we grew up. My cousin just locked herself in her room and cried. We ended up leaving late because of all the drama. When we finally got to the beach, It was like we brought the storm with us. The weather was terrible, and we couldn't even enjoy the beach. My cousin spent most of the time in her room, and I was stuck with my other cousins who wouldn't stop talking about how my dad was probably having a great time without us. Then, 2 days into the trip, we got the news. My dad's wedding was off. His girlfriend had left him, just packed her bags and disappeared. No note, no call, nothing. My dad was a wreck. He called me sobbing, saying he didn't know what he did wrong. I didn't know what to say. I felt bad for him, but I also couldn't forget how quickly he moved on after Mom died. The rest of the trip was awkward. We all felt guilty for being there instead of with my dad, but no one said it. We just sat around, not talking much. My cousin finally came out of her room and tried to act like everything was fine, but we could all tell she felt responsible for the wedding being canceled. When we got back home, my dad was waiting for me. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. He said he wanted to talk. He told me that he knew he'd messed up, that he rushed into a new relationship because he couldn't handle being alone. He said he realized that he hadn't been there for me when I needed him the most. I didn't know what to feel. I was angry, but I also felt sorry for him. He was trying to make things right, but it felt like too little, too late. I told him I needed time to think about everything. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, my grandmother called. She said she had something important to tell me about my mom. Turns out, my mom had been sick for a lot longer than we knew. She'd kept it a secret, even from my dad. She didn't want anyone to worry. My grandmother found her diary where she wrote about her illness and how she was preparing for the worst. It hit me hard. My mom had been dealing with this all alone, and my dad had been clueless. It made me see him in a different light. Maybe he wasn't just some heartless guy who moved on too fast. Maybe he was just trying to cope with his own pain. I decided to forgive my dad, not because he deserved it, but because holding on to the anger was only hurting me. We started talking more, trying to rebuild our relationship. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.